We're joined by Ted Kattouf, a former U.S. ambassador to Syria. He also serves as president of AMIDEAST, a nonprofit group aimed at strengthening ties between the U.S., the Middle East, and North Africa. One observer said the whole process is close to just basically coming apart if the cessation in hostilities doesn't get put back in place. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is saying the conflict in many ways is out of control. He's pushing as well for a new truce. And we're hearing that U.S. and Russia are keeping extra people in Geneva to try and work something out. Can they get a deal done?
Well, you never want to say never. But on the other hand, John Kerry is usually an optimistic fellow who believes that he can work magic, and there doesn't seem to be right now any optimism at all. That's not a good sign.
What happened? Because this fragile cessation of hostilities seemed to be kind of in place for a while, and then boom, we're seeing just an enormous range of violence.
Yeah. It seems to me that the amazing thing is that the ceasefire lasted as long as it did, not that it's becoming unraveled. The reason being is two major parties fighting in Syria were never a party to the ceasefire, the terrorist groups, Daesh or ISIL, whatever you prefer, and the Nusra Front. And the Syrians and Russians made it clear they'd continue to fight those groups, particularly the Nusra Front has allies within the, quote, legitimate opposition. So it's always been a difficult thing to argue that the Syrians and Russians are hitting the legitimate opposition, because they'll say, no, we were hitting Nusra. It's not our fault if these people are in bed with them.
Right. And when it comes to this area, as you well know, there's two wars going on. There's the one where we see so much violence and death, and then there's the war of perception, each one trying to paint their own version of things. The opposition saying that the government is pounding them in Aleppo in an effort to drive them out. The government counters by saying the rebels are shelling government-held positions, meaning they're getting top-of-the-line weaponry from Arab states and Turkey. Is there a little truth on both sides, or how do we determine what the truth is?
There's almost certainly some truth in both sides, and we'll never get to the bottom of this because it's a he said kind of thing, and the monitors can only monitor so much. So we have a situation where clearly the regime has committed abominable and horrendous acts hitting hospitals and clinics in Aleppo. And one could surmise that they're trying to punish the civilian population, among which the opposition is embedded, and drive them out of Aleppo altogether. After all, the predominantly Alawite army is a minority group, and the more Sunnis that leave the country that are with the opposition, the better for them.
I heard one analyst say that there's really three options here: a full-scale, full-blown war where there's no turning back. A second, there's this balance of power in Syria in the sense that it's a balance of weakness. No side is going to end up winning this thing. So you basically carve up the country. This group gets this area, that group gets another. Third is, of course, Geneva works, which we haven't really seen anything there. Do you think there's a fourth option, or do you think this person's right, that these are the three things we're looking at?
You know, I think that's a good analysis. These are the three things we're looking at. Unfortunately, right now, the least likely scenario is that Geneva works. I think the Russians would like to get some credit for being statesmanlike and bringing the regime along on some of this. But remember, Iran is also backing the regime, and Iran is a lot more determined to keep the Assad regime in power, I think, than Russia is. And Iran has troops on the ground. They have Hezbollah to call on. They have sympathetic Iraqi militias. And so Iran has a lot of cards in this game.
So it's been a proxy war from the beginning. Is there a game changer out there? I mean, is Iran the linchpin if they decide to change? I mean, is there one group or country that can make a difference in all of this?
I think everybody's dug in, and therefore the Syrian people are the victims and are the ones suffering. Because whether you're talking about Turkey, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the great powers, everybody has their own interests, and they don't necessarily align with one another. In fact, they don't align at all with one another when you talk about Saudi Arabia and Turkey on one side and Iran on the other. And we and the Russians can't quite see eye to eye either in terms of the long-term fate of Assad himself.
Ambassador Kattouf, always a pleasure having you on. Thanks so much.
Thank you, sir.